Welcome to a special edition of Wowcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. The team is heads down on wrapping up the expansion ahead of launch, but today we are joined by a few incredible guests. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Maria Hamilton. I'm the Associate Design Director on WoW.
Hello, my name is Morgan Day. I am one of the Associate Game Directors working on The War Within.
And I'm Terran Gregory, the Cinematic Narrative Director for World of Warcraft.
So how does the team even approach something as ambitious as the World Soul Saga?
In a word, enthusiastically. We have a really unique opportunity here with the 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft that's fast approaching. We really wanted to take a step back and reevaluate how we develop our expansions. In the past, we might have come at it from the perspective of, well, we've done this a couple times, how did we do it in the past? And moving forward philosophically, we really want to take a fresh new approach and take our community's excitement and feedback and really make sure that's at the forefront of all of our development moving forward. We wanted to build upon the successes of Dragonflight, right? We felt like we built a really strong foundation there and take a lot of those successes and look to achieve new goals as we move into the World Soul Saga and the War Within. Some of those ideas would be allowing the players to have new ways to express themselves and make sure that there's a ton of variety in the content that they're experiencing in World of Warcraft. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're bringing World of Warcraft to as broad an audience as possible, and we're really working to build new accessibility features and also just new exciting ideas that we also want to bring to the table. Finally, guiding us and crafting this epic adventure is the narrative, right? That's at the forefront of all of our ideas and all of the stories that we're developing along the way. We always like to plan ahead when we're developing World of Warcraft, but this time is a bit different, right? It's multiple expansions all at once that we're really trying to plant the seeds for these future ideas as we move forward in the World Soul Saga. And at times, I've been in meetings with our creative direction group, and it can be a bit of a challenge to keep all of these ideas in my head all at once. There's a lot of threads that are flying around, but I think the team, is really energized by that opportunity to kind of tell such an epic story. And thankfully, Terran is here, and he's going to talk a bit about all of those awesome ideas as we move forward. And, he's kind of the expert of pulling all of those threads and bringing them all together.
It's kind of like the conspiracy meme sometimes with the dots and the threads.
What are you most excited for, Terran, with the War Within story?
Well, working on World of Warcraft is always exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love working on this world and with this team. It's been really, really, really exciting getting to work with Chris Metzen again after his return and setting the vision for the World Soul Saga, this new chapter of Warcraft that's going to take us through the next few updates. As Morgan mentioned, right, like during Dragonflight, we feel that represented a lot of change, a lot of lessons applied, lessons learned. Looking back on Shadowlands, I believe that we took a lot from that story and developed new ways that we were going to present our characters, our villains, our storylines, and Dragonflight was the first step, but I believe that War Within is a great leap forward in our ambitions to create a compelling narrative, bring our characters to the forefront, and really open the first chapter in the next pivotal moment of World of Warcraft that will set the stakes for the story that will unfold throughout the World Soul Saga.
What would you say are some of the narrative aspirations of the saga?
Well, I feel that we've set the bar really high, and we want to meet those expectations and even exceed them. Really trying to create something in the vein of the essence of Warcraft, or the best of Warcraft, bringing that to the forefront. The ways we're going to do that is really investing in our world and story. We always say world and story are some of the most critical parts of the appeal of World of Warcraft, but what does that really mean? Our world is a character. It is fleshed out through all means of small stories, big stories, but we want people to be invested in our characters. We want them to go on the adventure with them, to learn more. I believe we have some really compelling stories with some of our most known characters, some of our lesser known characters, and some new characters that we're going to meet along the way.
Something that I love about the World Soul Saga, and we were talking about the 20th anniversary earlier, is that's a really unique strength of World of Warcraft, right? We have characters that you've literally grown up with, right? Like at the launch of World of Warcraft, Anduin, I think, was literally in a crib, right?
He was a little boy. He was a little boy. Have you seen my father?
Yeah, exactly. And we've watched him grow from that boy to the boy prince to now the king that he is today. And this journey is going to continue to take characters like Anduin and continue to see them evolve, and others as well. Like Dagram plays a huge role in The War Within, and that's another character that was just a little baby when we started out, and they're going to be taking a much larger role in this epic saga.
Yeah. I think another lesson we learned is, cadence and delivery. There were some instances where it felt maybe like the story was very start and stop, or people had to wait around for a long time for resolutions to long-established storylines. And so in trying to address that, we're really looking at the saga as the opportunity to resolve more storylines, bring up new questions, drive the story forward. And one of the things that helps us do that now is the improved content cadence that has been established in Dragonflight. This gives us some really, really handy tools for being able to have smaller updates between larger updates in which we can have the story move forward, we can focus on individual characters, flesh out their stories more, or even just give the sense that the world is always moving forward and that there's something always new to see in World of Warcraft when it comes to our narrative.
Speaking of characters, Xal'atath is everywhere. She is amazing. What do you think about our new villain?
Xal'atath is very much an interesting character, and I'm super excited to see the reception that people have had since we announced that she's going to be, very much starring in the beginning of The War Within. When it comes to our villains and the development of our villains, we have learned many lessons. We feel that maybe there's been a couple instances where we didn't quite do the work to earn them out or introduce them to our players in a way that felt organic or compelling. Xal'atath is an opportunity to have this character that, for those who played Shadow Priest in Legion, it was a very compelling character. She's marked very, very highly in terms of kind of fan favorite, but also lesser known. And that's kind of a magic combination of hey, let's take this character and bring them into the spotlight and give them a really compelling arc. And much like we had done throughout Dragonflight in the development of the primal incarnates like Iridikron and Viranoth and Farak, we put a lot of effort into bringing them into the story one step at a time, introducing them to the player, giving them compelling motivations, making them a dimensional character, making their desires, and making them real people that we can understand and get along with. And Xal'atath is now on her own trajectory to step into the limelight of World of Warcraft, and we're hoping to meet all of those same things. And I really feel that Xal'atath is going to be a very interesting character as we watch her story unfold.
I've been quite both surprised and excited by the reception of Xal'atath. I think having kind of those foundations where there's some of the community that's like, oh, you're just getting to know this person, where other people have, like Terran mentioned, have been kind of questing with her or experiencing her story in the past. And there's also a lot of really fun stuff and opportunities as we are able to plan so far ahead now, where we can plant these seeds knowing, this is the destination. And as we're moving towards that direction, what are things that we can kind of plant? And maybe the players find them, maybe they see it, and maybe they don't. There was some text that showed up in Dalaran where they were talking about oh, wait a minute, that's new. What's going on here? And they were kind of piecing together some stuff.
One thing I love that we set forth to do was mid-Dragonflight, in the spirit of wanting to seed these stories sooner, to have people along for the ride, to notice the little details. And there was this moment with Iridikron when he was escaping through a portal, and in development we had just slipped this little shadow, elven silhouette in the background of the portal. And a lot of people were like, no one's ever going to notice that. And we're like, that's the idea. The idea is that it's so subtle that when they discover it, it's going to generate all this conversation. And it did, right? There was all this conversation about Xal'atath, and everyone started to get really excited. And so that kind of started building a slow burn on everyone getting Xal'atath into the conversation. So by the time she was announced at BlizzCon, it actually felt like, oh, yes, we've been expecting this.
Obviously.
Obviously, right? So it's just fun ways that we're trying to seed and plant and prepare the audience for what's ahead.
I think one of the things that makes Xal'atath really, really interesting for players is there's an awful lot of them that want to be her buddy, who don't see her as a villain, right? So no villain is the villain of their story. They're the hero of their story. And that makes this interesting, too, because we can play with that a little bit. We can make sure that we're leaning into it. Is she really the villain?
So the world is just as important as the villains. Maria, what approach have you taken for world building?
I mean, as Terran pointed out, and I think we've talked about in the past, the world really is one of our main characters. And it's really important that when we go into these different zones that we've created, they feel alive, they feel appropriate to their cultures that live within them. unexpectedly, perhaps, we decided to make this a very vertical expansion. So we're starting off on the surface in the Isle of Dorne, which has your classic plains, your beautiful grasslands, and big city, Dornegal. This is where our Earthen live, trying to carry out the edicts of the Titans. And this is where the Coreway is located. So we go down the Coreway and we get down into the Ringing Deeps. And the Ringing Deeps is where the machine speakers, the Earthen that are dedicated to tending the machines and the vast works of the Titans live and work. And so where we're really starting to subvert expectations is when you go from the Ringing Deeps into Hollowfall. It's a huge, huge area. You can't tell that it's underground. You can't tell that it's a cavern. It's lit by this enormous crystal. And then as you descend, you're going to go down into the last kingdom of the Nerubians, into Aj-Kahet. And this is all about danger and dark elegance. And the whole area is meant to serve as an opportunity to learn about the Nerubians and their big city there, which has been built upon centuries and centuries and centuries of decay. They just build the city on top of itself.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that going vertically down.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we learned from Zaralek Cavern in Dragonflight. We knew we were making an underground space. We knew we wanted players to be able to transition seamlessly into that space. The idea was to sort of give you this increasingly wondrous, joyful descent, and make the world really feel alive, make it feel like it fits with those cultures that are living there. The reactions that we saw from people playing on beta when they first entered Hollowfall, which is just amazing.
Yeah, I love the attention to detail in all the zones. I mean, you just mentioned Hollowfall, but like something that it took me a while to even notice it, but when I did, it like blew my mind was, like you mentioned, there's that huge crystal underground, and it's the sole light source. So if you look around the zone, all of the trees and the plants are actually facing that light source. Like if you think about plants out in the world, they kind of follow the sun. Well, what if the sun was static?
We have a desire to help make everything feel right. Everything needs to feel like it makes sense. So for the Arathi, they have these airships, and so all of their tables and chairs and props and things that are scattered around their city, they all have these brackets on them because they would have been mounted on the airships when they traveled. Another good example is the Earthen. So the Earthen are made of stone, and their beds, entertainingly, look almost like a barbecue because they like to be warm. So there's fiery coals underneath them on their beds, and you can see them.
One of the other things I love about the Earthen is they actually have these like memory crystals, because they themselves are almost more of a construct, but this memory crystal has, their experiences, their memories, their, life story in them. And early on in the campaign, we learn about that memory crystal. And Dagran, who's quite the little tinkerer, finds this fascinating, and there's like a whole quest line where you get to learn about these memory crystals, and you kind of put them back in the archive, and you get to learn about this culture as you're kind of experiencing through the lens of these memory crystals.
And then for the Nerubians, we have a really funny local story, a really funny sort of take on what would happen if you encountered a Nerubian who had a fear like arachnophobia, but they're terrified of bipedal creatures because they don't have enough limbs, and it's just creepy, and it freaks them out. And there's so many more examples. The team really had a great time building out these cultures and these stories.
One of the things Morgan mentioned earlier was making it easier for players to play the way they want to play. How is that being reflected in the content we were building?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly learned a lot from Dragonflight. One of the areas that we started to improve on and now have continued is some UI improvements around both the icons on quests in the world, but also the quest journal. We've got some cool filtering that will let people find the kinds of quests that they're looking for and the kinds of activities. We have some great UI elements when you hover over markers on the map that let you see what sort of reward there might be and how much time it's going to be before something starts for events, for example. Additionally, with the introduction of warbands, we know that players may not want to play the story over and over. They may choose to play it on one of their characters and then play other things. And so we've made sure to provide a lot of local stories. These are stories that tell more about zones themselves, tell about the cultures in those zones, tell about the places, different individual smaller characters. We've provided those in a slightly greater number than we had in the past. We are making sure that we're using some of our new features as well to help tell the story. So we have been quite cognizant of the concerns that players who don't do a lot of raiding have raised about wanting to see that final moment. And so we're allowing players to do a story mode version of the raid, to have that final fight without needing to go to the trouble of getting a raid group or finding, enough friends to go defeat that boss. Same thing with dungeons. We added follower dungeons that allow people to play by themselves or with friends, and followers that are controlled by the computer. Delves is a new feature that we're really, really excited about. It's intended to help those outdoor players be able to pop in and do something fun and meaningful, and maybe they only have a short period of time. Now, Delves also have a progression system and a whole bunch of other stuff associated with it. So we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to understand and enjoy the story in the way that they like to play, recognizing that everybody doesn't have as much time or opportunity to sit down and join a big group of people.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the major goals, is not only with variety of things that you might be familiar with, like a lot of the cool outdoor events that you might have seen, and we want to make sure that you can kind of pick and choose the ones that you find exciting and you feel rewarded for those without feeling like you're kind of required to do everything. And then with Delves, that's a new pillar of content that we're building, where you wouldn't previously have been able to kind of experience this idea of like progression, but also building upon the story that we've been discussing. There's a big bad in there named Zekvir, who's kind of a lieutenant of Xal'atath, and this person's in charge of looking for the world soul memories that we're going to be learning more about as we progress through the War Within. And you'll eventually be able to unlock this Zekvir's lair, which is, I kind of equate it to like Onyxia's lair. So there's this big boss at the end of this experience that really feels like it's kind of the cherry on top for this progression, as well as this story that we're telling as you experience Delves.
What's one thing you guys are excited for players to experience?
Oh, I think there's just some fantastic local stories out there that are helping sell some of the themes that we're exploring. We also have a fascinating situation where Anduin, who has had some pretty tough times and is doubting himself quite a bit, comes face to face with Farron, who is a great contrast. She's very strong in her faith in herself and in the light, and the two of them meeting and having this opportunity to talk to each other. I think this is also a really key and important moment.
I'm right there with Maria. I'm just excited for people to get to meet these new characters. And there's a lot of like really fun story, not only with those individual characters, but also the cultures that the team has been building. A fun little detail, which isn't a spoiler, is you actually see these like lynxes that the Arathi in the zone are riding around on, and that's like a fun kind of nod to how when they set out, they actually went with some elves, and there's almost like this blend of cultures that are coming together in this zone, and it's really fun to kind of see all those little details as they express themselves in the game.
I think it's always an exciting time as we draw closer to the launch of an expansion where all of the content is going to be added to the game, even stuff that was obscured or hidden during testing or PTR. This classically represents the cinematics that the team has been working on for a long time and have some really amazing moments. I think the team has done amazing work on this, and I can't wait to see people's reactions to that content. And also, from all directions, every tool in our toolkit, we release more multimedia projects. I know that just recently we saw the story of Queen Ansarek in the cinematic we released, and that's in this vein of trying to build up our villains, give context, give backstory, give dimensionality, and seeing how things are stirring. And all of these different projects are coming together to really amplify and excite around the story of the War Within and set the stage for the ongoing World Soul Saga.
Thank you guys so much for joining me and talking about the World Soul Saga and the world building of the War Within.